Alright, I am back with another video, and today we've got, well, another Call of Cthulhu build. You can almost consider this a soft remake of my original build, which was titled The Investigator. You see, back then I did a build based on the player characters of Call of Cthulhu, a regular person who gets swept up in something that they don't understand / aren't really prepared for, and then end up coming into grips with horrendous eldritch beings and power beyond what they can fathom. And in the case of D&D, we were able to turn that into an actual build that uses magic, whereas in regular Call of Cthulhu that doesn't tend to go well for people. So, the thing with Call of Cthulhu is that it's not like D&D in the sense that you are these powerful heroes. You're regular people tackling a power way greater than yourself, and are very likely to die. And with my original build, I made a character who was just a regular dude investigating the Absolute before getting swept up into the Nordaloid, a bit like Tav's actual detective background. So then I thought, well, I've been theorizing this build for D&D 2024, the actual tabletop game, that is a Call of Cthulhu investigator who gets caught up in a cult-like ritual, actually ends up in front of an eldritch god, and then gets plucked into D&D. Like, they basically get, no better word for it, I guess, at this point, isekai'd. Good lord. So yeah, I thought, what would an actual 1920s to 40s era Call of Cthulhu investigator actually look like in a D&D setting? What would they be good at? How would their powers that came about through connection in this ritual actually manifest? And so this is why this is kind of a soft reboot of that original video, because it's got a similar concept and does some similar leveling, but overall goes about things a bit differently. Whereas that one was more about, you know, just being a straight up, you know, kind of like psychic build, this one's about being more of a skill monkey with some influence from Great Old One, but also using that to naturally lean into a new type of power set to make us the ultimate party face. Even if, at the end of the day, we're only human, and that makes us a bit squishy, because we're not a Forgotten Realms human who's built of slightly sterner stuff. We are a real-world Earth human who, well, like I say, they're a bit squishy. So, this one's going to be a party face, stand back and support and use battlefield control, deal big damage from range, and really try not to get hit. But that's kind of the point, right? It's all about the fun and the lore, and again, if I need to take a bit of a hit to a stat to make everything else really good and make this build feel the way it's supposed to be, then I'm all for it. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. First up, we are going to kick things off as a rogue. In a similar vein to my other build of the similar ilk, we do kind of start off as a rogue, because I consider that the closest thing to, like, regular dude. I guess fighter also works, but most regular people aren't masters of every single weapon they come across. But I do think this character, again, especially after being plucked into a new world, may have acquired some eldritch knowledge that allows them to wield some basic weaponry. In this case, I've decided this character maybe had some sort of walking cane at some point, or maybe some sort of like blackjack or something that they're going to use throughout this playthrough, so we're going to be using that for this build. But the main thing we want to start off with Rogue is oh god, I can't speak, with Rogue is for the skill proficiencies. Of course, we are an investigator, and we want to be the sharpest tool in the shed. We want to have a wide array of skills and be good at all of them. So, let's take a look at what's available to us. First up, strength is at 8. We don't need it for this build anyway, but because we're going to be using the Club of Hill Giant Strength, we're actually going to have a 19, and I feel like us being blessed with otherworldly strength, well, blessed, perhaps not the right word, but I do think it can work. Dexterity is at 14. Again, we're not normally that agile. Again, not as agile as a normal D&D character, but I think 14 is good for someone who, again, is a normal human, but has been given a bit of extra juice from something beyond the veil. Constitution is at 10. Again, this is intentional because we're meant to be squishy. Obviously, this means that if you jump into the front line, you're gonna die, so you need to approach every situation with thought and care, just like actual Call of Cthulhu. You can't just run in guns blazing, you got to approach with a strategy, you've got to think, and you've got to be ready for the worst. Hell, I would put this at 8 if I didn't think everyone was going to flay me alive. and if it wasn't going to make all of our other ability scores odd. So, you know, yeah, we'll keep it a little bit higher than 8. Intelligence is at 14. A lot of the investigative skills are related to intelligence, so I want this high of an intelligence score. Wisdom is at 12, because again, insight is related to wisdom, so I want that here. And charisma is at 17, obviously, because this is going to be important for the most important party-face checks, that being the charisma ones, as well as it is going to be our main spellcasting modifier, as this build is primarily a spellcaster by the time we get down to it. For our skill proficiencies, we are going to have access to quite a few things. First off, for a detective who's looking into the Eldritch Occult, we definitely want to go with the Sage background, giving us Arcana and History. I like to think that before our character got taken to the D&D world, they actually were in possession of a ritual tome of, you know, their Eldritch god, Cthulhu. And as such, he was reading and studying the occult-like passives and all these different ancient spells that it maybe did start to drive him a little bit mad, but he had a thirst for knowledge, so Sage giving us inspiration from gaining knowledge makes a ton of sense. And also because he's learning about those arcane rituals, he would have a bit of Arcana, and looking into the history of the whole thing, well, he would have history. So I feel like these two background proficiencies make sense. For our rogue proficiencies, of course, we're taking investigation and we're putting our expertise into it. I want this to be as high as possible. We are a detective, we are an investigator, we're here to solve a mystery. Insight I'm going to put proficiency into, so of course we can help us read people and tell when they're lying. We've gone with a human, so we do get a free skill proficiency of our choice, any kind that we like, and I've decided to go with perception today to again help us spot hidden details and clues. Spot hidden is one of the most important skills in Call of Cthulhu, and I wanted to make sure that we had it. For our charisma skills that we're going to be starting off with, we're going to start with persuasion and intimidation. I particularly wanted intimidation here because, you know, it makes sense to have, and I wanted to pick up persuasion here so that we would get expertise in it. Do know, though, that when we obviously go into Warlock, you can get beguiling influence to gain proficiency in persuasion and deception, but that is going to overlap with some stuff that I want to get later, so I think for now, intimidation and persuasion, especially expertise in persuasion, is going to be the best way to go. Right, that is level 1 for us, and it's looking pretty good so far. Now, in my original build, I went to level 3 of Rogue to grab Arcane Trickster for the Mage Hand Ledger domain, and kind of like to start our awakening to our new powers granted by the ritual gone wrong, shall we say. That's not the case here. We're going to be going straight into Warlock. Again, we were able to come face to face with Cthulhu himself before we were transported here, and as such, we now have a small semblance of his power. So, as a Warlock, we're going to be able to choose our subclass right away at level 1, and of course we're going with Great Old One. This is going to give us access to Mortal Reminder, allowing us to inflict the frightened condition upon a critical hit if the enemy fails a wisdom saving throw against our spell save DC. We get to choose 2 cantrips here, and well, there's nothing else really to it. We are going to take Eldritch Blast here. We are a squishy dude. We want to stay in the backline, and if we're staying in the backline, Eldritch Blast is the best thing for us here. I wish this had the D&D 2024 ability to, you know, change the damage type of this into Psychic, which would be amazing, but unfortunately we don't have that here. However, let me know if you would like to see the actual D&D 2024 version of this build, because there are some interesting combos there, and I honestly think it works better in the tabletop. But I'm also going to grab Mage Hand as an homage to the original build, but I do also like our Psychic abilities manifesting as a Mage Hand, allowing us to move objects with our mind, because, you know, that kind of makes sense. Anyways, moving on, we also do get to choose a couple of spells, and the game has given us both Tasha's Hideous Laughter and Dissonant Whispers. I might take Tasha's later, but I do want to grab Arms of Hadar for now. Dissonant Whispers obviously makes sense. It's a psychic damage attack that allows us to inflict the frightened condition on a creature, and Arms of Hadar is us literally summoning Cthulhu's tentacles to smack someone for necrotic damage from preventing the target from using reactions, both of which feel very much on point for this build. At Warlock level 2, we're going to get that extra spell slot, as well as another spell choice, and at this point, let's grab Tasha's. We're also going to be able to grab 2 Eldritch Invocations. Obviously, I want Agonizing Blast, allowing us to be able to add our Charisma modifier to the damage of Eldritch Blast. Now, for your second option, you've got a few. Devil's Sight, obviously, always great. Could help with our perception checks and such like that. You know, in roleplay, not actually in the mechanics, I guess. We also have Beast Speech, allowing us to speak with animals for even more roleplay opportunities, probably my favourite option here. There's Repelling Blast if we need to push people away, could definitely be useful. Honestly, you've got a lot of options here, and we'll be able to take quite a lot of invocations on this build, so I definitely think it's a pick your favourite situation. Like I said, we won't be grabbing Beguiling Influence here, because we'll be able to get these skills a different way. But here we go, we can take Beast Speech here, because again, I really like being able to speak with animals in this game, because I think it opens up so much, and I feel like the idea of this guy suddenly being able to psychically communicate with animals is just going to make things even weirder. We're going to have to watch our sanity score with this build. And then at Warlock level 3, we're going to get our Pact Boon, and this is going to be important, but let's pick our level 2 spell first. Obviously, Crown of Madness. Nothing else to it. Literally, we're going to lower our opponent's sanity score and drive them mad, instilling madness, making them attack the creature closest to them other than ourselves. Pretty fun spell, obviously fits the build. Moving on, though, for our Pact Boon. Now, as I said, the whole reason we even were able to get involved with the Cthulhu stuff in the first place is because we discovered an ancient tome of Eldritch power. So Pact of the Tome here makes sense. This is going to give me a ton of stuff that I want for this build, namely guidance, which is a huge one for us because we're going to be a skill monkey. We're going to be good at pretty much all of the relevant checks in the game. Giving ourselves an additional 1d4 bonus to those same checks just makes sense. But in addition to this, we're also going to get Vicious Mockery, which is going to be our bridge, roleplay-wise, into the next part of this build. Vicious Mockery allows us to use our literal words to deal psychic damage to an opponent. I think in this case, if I was flavouring it in tabletop, this would be less of a taunt and more of like these kind of like hideous commands or something. Like he's just like whispering weird eldritch truths to someone and they take psychic damage from that. But of course we get to insult a creature, giving it disadvantage on its next attack roll, which is a fun little cantrip to have. We also do get Thorn Whip, which in this case I would reflavor as, again, summoning a tentacle rather than a Thorn Whip, but hey, you know, it's nice to have, I guess, but we kind of want to keep our enemies away from us for the most part. But again, I do think Pact of the Tome makes the most sense. However, Pact of the Chain would also be fun as well. I'm going to deliberately avoid Pact of the Blade on this one. Now, normally most people here would go for Warlock level 4, but actually, I kind of want to focus on other stuff first. Because we just got Vicious Mockery, we're starting to learn how to use the art of the voice to be able to manipulate our powers, be able to control the flow of eldritch power within us. Like I say, we're whispering, you know, these things in this ancient forgotten language, and as such, because we now are able to use our voice as a source of power, we can start leveling in Bard, which is going to be the biggest difference from the original build. With Bard, we're going to gain access to a few things, like Bardic Inspiration, to be able to buff up our allies, but we're not really going to be using this that much, unfortunately. However, we are going to get a couple of cantrips, and since we already have Vicious Mockery, we don't need to pick it up here. So we're going to grab Friends to grab ourselves advantage on charisma checks that we need to make, as well as Minor Illusion to play with our opponent's minds even more. Next up for our spells, we have quite a few options here, but of course we've already got a couple of the good ones from Warlock. First up, Heroism, preventing us from being frightened. I like the idea that now that we've stared into the face of literal creation in our eyes, well, I mean, or whatever lies within the deepest pits of our sanity, things don't really scare us anymore, so making ourselves immune to the frightened condition and giving us a little bit of extra tankiness each turn feels kind of nice. I also like Bane to impose a penalty on saving throws from our opponents, since we have so many effects that require saving throws. And the next one I think is kind of fun. Disguise Self. Disguise Self is an interesting one for us, allowing us to magically change all aspects of our appearance. Now, you tell me that this guy who can psychically manipulate people's minds, if he needs to investigate things, would he not shift people's perception of him to be the most ideal form for the situation at hand? This will allow us to gain racial bonuses from armor pieces and equipment if we want to. It can activate unique dialogue checks for us that we might need for certain roleplay situations, and it's even going to synergize with a piece of equipment that we're going to be using later, the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring, to give us an additional d4 to all of our checks. So we can just cast Disguise Self, and then with Guidance, have 2d4 bonus to our checks. In my opinion, that's a pretty damn good investigator. Then finally, there's one other thing we can get here. Healing spells can work, but I like getting Longstrider here so we have even more movement speed so we can continue to maintain distance. It doesn't matter what instrument you pick, as we're going to be unequipping it and using our voice. And finally, because we multiclass into Bard, we get an extra skill proficiency. We're not going to take Deception or Performance because we're going to be grabbing the Actor feat later, so we can pick up something else instead. You got Survival, Medicine, Animal Handling, Religion, Nature, Stealth, Sleight of Hand, Acrobatics, whatever you want to grab. Now, again, Call of Cthulhu investigators kind of have to run and hide a lot in order to be able to not die, so let's grab Stealth, just because it can be useful. At Bard level 2, we're going to get Jack of all trades, so now even if we're not proficient in something, we'll add half of our proficiency bonus rounded down. That's pretty neat. We're also going to get Song of Rest to give us a third short rest, which is great for Warlock, replenishing our spell slots. We also do get to choose another spell at this point, and honestly, it's up to you what you want to pick. It really doesn't matter. I would say Featherfall is another good option just for helping to traverse the map and getting to places that we need to go. Now, at Bard level 3, you get to choose your subclass, and I would say College of Glamour would be a pretty interesting option here, but I do think College of Law is the best one for us. Again, we are this investigative character. We are looking to gather as much lore, knowledge, and, you know, arcane ability as we can in order to not only survive in this new world we find ourselves in, but to also solve, you know, our mystery, to figure out what is going on. What is this eldritch entity that has brought us here, and all that sort of thing, and how can we get back? So, becoming a College of Law Bard makes the most sense. We get to use our voice in even more ways, allowing us to use cutting words to apply our bardic inspiration as a penalty to our enemies' saving throws and actions, which can be really, really useful on a control-based build like this one. However, the real big thing that we get from this is 3 more skill proficiencies and 2 more expertise, which is kind of insane. Obviously, I want insight expertise to be able to always tell when people are lying. And I would say at this point, it's kind of up to you what you want to throw your other expertise into. We have a lot of options that I think would work well, but I think I'm going to go with Perception because, again, as someone who is an actual Call of Cthulhu player, having these 2 skills be high makes a lot of sense. So now we really are the perfect investigator. We now also get to choose 3 more skill proficiencies. Let's grab Sleight of Hand so that we have the full stealth set, shall we say. I would say Religion expertise at this point. We've learned quite a lot about the world that we inhabit at this point in time, so I think grabbing Religion proficiency does make the most sense, and again, it gives us more knowledge to work with in investigations. And finally, your last one could be whatever you like. I would say Nature or maybe Medicine could be good, maybe would be on theme. Survival I can kinda see, maybe not so much, I'm not sure yet. But I think I'll go with Nature for now, because there are quite a few checks related to Nature in the game. So, as of now, we have access to Sleight of Hand, Stealth, Arcana, History, Investigation, Nature, Religion, Intimidation, and Persuasion, with 4 of these skills having expertise. And we're only going to get more from here. We also did get to choose a level 2 spell at this point, and I'm going to grab Detect Thoughts to allow us to detect thoughts. For a cost of our spell slot, we will actually be able to read the minds of our opponents. Again, what detective/investigator would not want to read the thoughts of the person they're investigating? This feels like it makes so much sense, and fits with the Great Old One theming, so we're going to take it here. Now, we're not going to be going to Bard level 4 of this build, so let's jump back over to Warlock for our first feat of the build. At total level 8. Which may seem bad, I understand that. But, again, as someone who's not really meant to be on the front lines, we do have a pretty solid overall stat spread. We effectively have a 16 in Charisma, which is more than enough for, like, most of the early to mid-game, I would say, which is probably where we are at this point. Wisdom and Intelligence are good, and Dexterity is decent. We will have a decent armor class. Constitution obviously being the thing, but again, I tested this build solo, and it did fine in solo despite all of this, so with teammates, you're going to be absolutely fine. Maybe if you're not on honor mode. Whoops, did I say that out loud? Anyways, moving on, we do get to choose another cantrip at this point, and let's grab Bone Chill for a bit of necrotic damage. We also do get to choose another level 2 spell at this point, and while I could see people going for Shadow Blade as a psychic manifestation of your power in a weapon form, we're not really using weapons in this build, so I don't think it's entirely necessary. So really, it's up to you what you want to grab. Phantasmal Force, Ray of Enfeeblement, Hex. All of these work, but I'd rather go for something that's really a non-concentration option, if we can help it, or maybe something that's more useful outside of combat, like invisibility. There's also Expeditious Retreat, that is concentration, but it can still work out. Darkness, if you really want to go down that route. There's a lot of things available to you, but Mirror Image can help with our lower armor class and might get us out of a sticky situation in some cases, so I could see you picking that, but it's entirely up to you. Moving on, we do get to choose our first feat of the build, and we're going to... I mean, I do this a lot on my charisma builds now, but honestly, it's just such a good feat. We're going for Actor, increasing our charisma by 1, rounding it up to an 18, and giving us proficiency and expertise in deception and performance checks. So now, that's 2 more expertise to add to our repertoire. Why not? At Warlock level 5, we're going to get our Deepened Pact feature, letting us add Animate Dead, Haste, and Call Lightning once per long rest to our spell list. Haste once per long rest is pretty damn good. I use a piece of equipment that gives us that all the time, so being able to quickly haste up one of our allies and then hang out in the back firing off Eldritch Blasts is going to feel pretty good. Animate Dead is going to give us an additional ally, and Call Lightning... I mean, I used it in my combat footage and it did a bit of damage, so that's kind of nice. But anyways, moving on, we do get to choose a level 3 spell, and what else is there other than Fear? Making targets drop everything, becoming fearful, and running away from us, and having disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. This is an awesome spell that obviously makes sense. We literally summon the thought of what we saw, you know, like Cthulhu himself into the minds of others, and they just break and run away in fear. However, at this point, I might just replace a spell. To be honest, I think I'll ditch Mirror Image for something else at level 3 here, which is going to be the Hunger of Hadar, literally summoning the Eldritch Abyss to deal 2d6 cold damage and 2d6 acid damage and blinding creatures within. Obviously, and also making a space of difficult terrain. Very, very fun spell, but I don't use nearly enough. We're also going to get another Eldritch Invocation at this point, and honestly, I'm tempted to take one with Shadows here, allowing us to gain that invisibility that I mentioned earlier, as long as we stand still. So it can kind of work, but not really. Devil's Sight to be able to see in magical and non-magical darkness is also really good, and I would probably take that at this point. You know, we have like our Awakened Mind and such like that, so, you know, I feel like Devil's Sight could work pretty nicely here. At Warlock level 6, we're going to get Entropic Ward, allowing us to, as a reaction, impose disadvantage on an attack roll against us, once per short rest. And if the attack misses, we gain advantage on our next attack roll against that attacker until our next turn. So overall, pretty damn nice. It just gives us a little bit more to work with in terms of dodging an attack if we need to. We also do get another level 3 spell at this point, Hypnotic Pattern, Slow. Bestow Curse, Counterspell, Fly, they all work, so it's a pick your favourite situation. We have a lot of battlefield control spells already, but I do just love that Slow. Being able to target up to 6 creatures and slow them, meaning that they have to choose either their action or their bonus action each turn, not both, and reducing their AC and Dexterity saving throws by 2, which just feels so good. I could see Counterspell also being good here, but with our limited spell slots to be able to use it, it doesn't feel as good except as it would on something like a wizard or a sorcerer, so we're going to take Slow today. At Warlock level 7, we're going to get another spell. This time it can be a level 4 spell. And what else is there but Ivard's Black Tentacles? Again, literally tentacles this time, allowing them to sprout out from the ground, turning the area into difficult terrain, attacking and smothering creatures within. When it attacks, it'll deal 3d6 bludgeoning damage to anyone within the radius, and smothering means that they won't be able to move and will have their attack rolls made with disadvantage, as well as their Dexterity saving throws, and you have advantage to hit them. Overall, pretty goddamn strong as an area of effect, and of course it makes sense for a Cthulhu build. How could I not take it? We also are going to get another Eldritch Invocation at this point. We can grab Dreadful Word for Confusion, Sculpture of Flesh for Polymorph, Book of the Ancient Secrets for Ray of Sickness, Chromatic Orb, and Silence. Entirely up to you. I feel like having the extra option in Confusion, though, feels pretty fun. Confusion allowing us to confuse a group of enemies, making it so they're hostile to everyone, could maybe just wander around aimlessly, and even just skip their turn occasionally. Can be a pretty fun control spell overall. And finally, at Warlock level 8, we get to choose another spell. At this point, we kind of have everything that I want, so we can grab the aforementioned counterspell. But honestly, something like Banishment could be quite fun, Dimension Door for teleporting around, Dominate Beast, you know, you got a lot of options here. We also do get to choose our next feat of the build, and honestly, you kind of have a free choice here. Warcaster can give you advantage on concentration saving throws, which could help with our lower concentration. But again, we don't need to worry about that too much, since really we're not going to be getting hit too much with this build, so we don't have to worry about our constitution as much here, but I can see why someone might want to take it. Tough for more HP, so basically two different ways of patching up our lower constitution if you want. With tough rounding us out to an 87, that could be good. Spell Sniper would also be good, being able to make it so your Eldritch Blast crits on a 19 or higher, as well as allowing you to take another spell, entirely up to you. Lucky is also really good for manipulating the world around you and everybody else's rolls. And honestly, this all feels pretty good. And there's obviously also the Skilled Feat, which would give you access to 3 more skill proficiencies, in which case you could take Medicine, Survival, and I would probably say Acrobatics, since we don't need Animal Handling since we have Speak of Animals. And we don't need Athletics because we just don't. So if you wanted to really max out how many skills you have, there you go. Really, it's entirely up to you. What you want to grab here, really, it doesn't matter. I would say, I think I took Spell Sniper in my testing just to make our Eldritch Blast a bit more effective, so I would take that. And I will take, well, I guess, Shocking Grasp in case someone does run up to us. We can quickly throw a Shocking Grasp at them and then run away because they won't be able to take a reaction. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a pretty damn competent party face. You have expertise in a bunch of skills as well as proficiency in most of them, and even the little bit that you don't have proficiency in, you can still add half of your proficiency bonus to. You're a warlock with 3 short rests, meaning that you're incredibly resource efficient, and you have a way of boosting every little thing that you do. Your skill checks, you've got guidance, as well as some other things I'll get into in a minute. You've got a multitude of high damaging cantrips, all with different effects for various different situations. You've got battlefield control. You've got support. You've got everything that you could possibly need to become the most competent investigator in the Forgotten Realms. But we're not done yet. As I said, with my original build, the Investigator, you can use Illithid powers with this build. However, because that previous build was so reliant on the Illithid powers, I decided not to actually go too in depth with them here, to the point where I didn't actually use them in my testing, and this build still did amazing. However, if you want to use Illithid powers with this one, here's what you can do. You can get Illithid expertise to gain expertise in intimidation, persuasion, and deception, which can change this build around a bit. You wouldn't need to use the active feat, so maybe you could round out your stats even more with a 16 in charisma to put something else up a little bit higher. You would also get access to things like Black Hole, Repulsor, Stage Fright, pretty much as many Illithid powers as you could get your hands on. You'd probably want to, but that depends if you want to go down more the original build's route, where you slowly go more and more insane over time, whereas with this build, you're more channeling that power into something positive for yourself and actually are slightly more of a hero type. Really, it's 2 types of builds that are kind of similar, but, you know, and do similar things, but gone about in different ways, so you're going to get to choose the character flavor there. However, as always, I recommend you pick up the Awaken passive if you do go down the Illithid powers route, but otherwise, that's kind of the main gist of it. So yeah, overall, you've got a pretty solid ability set even without the Illithid powers, but if you want the Illithid powers, I do recommend it. Right, so let's talk about the rest of the build with the equipment. So first off, let's talk about our weapons. We have the Club of Hill Giant Strength, as I said, increasing our strength to 19 so that we have a pretty solid stat spread across the board. But in our offhand, we're bringing the Shadow Lantern. Now, it's a pretty iconic thing amongst Call of Cthulhu's kind of lore for a character to be wielding a lantern as they scour through the darkness, and that's something I kind of forgot to capture in my original build, so we have it here. As well as I also think of like the Call of Cthulhu like video game, which I plan on streaming at some point, by the way, although I keep promising to stream things and then don't because I don't have the time. But anyways, I do plan to play that at some point, maybe for Halloween, and so I did want to incorporate a lantern onto this build, and now we have the Shadow Lantern. This can be crafted in Act 2 by going through various different steps as you investigate what is probably the most eldritch part of the game, and by doing so you get this lantern, which can protect you from the curse of the Shadow Curse lands, as well as give you the Conjure Shadow Lantern Wraith spell, a unique spell to this lantern, which allows you to summon an undead creature, similar to Animate Dead, that comes with its own unique abilities. It has a necrotic damage claw attack, which is actually really powerful. It does slashing and necrotic damage, as well as the ability to sap your opponent's strength. Every time it uses this ability, it saps their strength by 3 and does a bit of necrotic damage. If their strength falls to 0 this way, they die. That's kind of powerful. So you're going to be using your eldritch abilities and your investigative skills to create this lantern, which will allow you to summon this powerful dark ally to your side, which I felt like was a fun bit of flavour that was missing from the original build. But anyways, let's talk about the rest of the build. I kind of wanted to go for a trench coat with like a fedora almost kind of look, like the kind of silhouette of like your old black and white detective movie character. So we've got kind of like a trench coat armour here in the form of the padded armour +2, which comes with a 13 base AC, so with our build we have about 16 AC total here, which again is not a lot, but that's kind of the point. But otherwise you can replace this with better armour if you so choose. I've combined this with the Hat of the Sharp Caster, which gives us that kind of, I guess, cowboy hat look, but in our case we can kind of flavour it as more of a, you know, like a old-timey detective's hat, like a fedora or something, in which case this is going to make our Eldritch Blast a bit better. Whenever we roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die for a spell attack, so with Eldritch Blast that's 3 beams, we can basically get like great weapon fighting on it, allowing us to re-roll those low damage die for higher damage ones, which I think is pretty cool. Overall though, in the early game we do have some options. Cap of Curing, so that when we use our Bardic Inspiration we can heal our allies, and also kind of has a similar look. We have the Marksmanship Hat to give us a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls, which can help with Eldritch Blast. And finally, the Gibbous of the Worshipful Servant, an alternate take on the hat, which I personally don't like as much, but would give you advantage on Constitution saving throws and momentum equal to your Charisma modifier at the start of combat, which is obviously very useful, but I think I prefer the Hat of the Sharpcaster for its looks overall. For our cloak, I've not included it directly here because of fashion reasons, but obviously it does work here. The Nymph cloak will give us access to Dominate Person, because of course we want Dominate Person on this build. Are you kidding me? That's kind of the whole point. I might just colour it in black, see what that looks like. Hey, there you go. For the record, all of the black dyed clothing you can see here is coloured in the Yulia's Dye mods black dye, which is available on all platforms, and the armour is coloured in the muddy red dye, just in case people ask and don't actually stick to the end of the video, where I normally talk about that. But anyways, yeah, so obviously the Nymph Cloak on this build giving us access to Dominate Person is a pretty damn good spell to have, so I like having it here. Moving on to our gloves, we have the Gloves of Missile Snaring. One of the biggest things this build had struggles with was ranged attacks, ending our concentration a bit sooner than we would like. So using our reaction in the Gloves of Missile Snaring, we can create a psychic barrier around us that can deflect ranged weapon attacks, reducing their damage by 1d10 plus our dexterity modifier, possibly nullifying them. This is obviously the same as Monk's similar feature, but any class can use it. And since we have a +2, this is a 1d10 +2, which honestly counters a lot of ranged attacks, more than you might think, even into the late game, so this feels pretty potent. And finally, just to give us a little bit more AC, we have the Evasive Shoes. There was nothing else I really wanted on this build, so this works just fine. For our amulets, we have the Amulet of the Harpers, giving us advantage on wisdom saving throws, which feels really, really nice for overcoming the effects that we deal. So basically things like Frightened and all that, that's all wisdom saving throws, so being resistant against them by having advantage feels pretty good. It's also going to give us shield once per long rest, which is nice. 1 shield is better than no shield. However, obviously in the late game, you could pick up the Amulet of Greater Health to give you a 23 in Constitution and advantage on Constitution saving throw checks, which would obviously make this build 1,000 times better, but kind of goes against the vision of it. I tried not to use any stat boosting equipment in this build because I really didn't want to. I wanted this build to feel authentic without needing to muddy about with different stat boosting items, and I honestly think I did succeed here, so I kind of like not having the Amulet of Greater Constitution here. Our character has decided to run off into the corner because his sanity score has finally dropped to 0. You know what? He's just going to stay there. In fact, we'll just kind of... There we go. We can stare at the pretty church window. But anyways, yes, so the Amulet of the Harpers is there to give us advantage on wisdom saving throws, which feels quite nice. But again, you can replace it if you like. Moving on, I mentioned this before, but the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring. While shapeshifted or disguising yourself, you gain a 1d4 bonus to all checks. This is awesome. Again, this can stack with guidance. So if we are using Disguise Self while making any of our skill checks, we gain a 2d4 bonus to those skill checks. You're basically, as long as you play this build right, you're never going to fail a skill check, which is awesome. And finally, because we're looking to seek for truth, we have the Ring of Truthfulness to give us advantage on our expertise insight checks. In fact, before we close out this build and the combat footage starts to roll, let's look at our skill proficiencies. So first up, our weakest skill proficiency by far is our athletics, which is +4. That's our weakest. Well, technically acrobatics is a +3, but considering without the Club of Hill Giant Strength, we have a negative modifier here. Normally, I think having a 4 by the end of the build with the club is pretty good. And I know I said I didn't want to use stat boosting equipment, but this is more of a flavor option than anything. It's not actually required for the build, so having a +4 in athletics is kind of nice. A +3 in acrobatics is also okay, but we don't really need it as long as we have a decent athletics. Sleight of hand and stealth are both at +6, which is more than enough for what we like to do in this game. Arcana, history, nature and religion are all +6, with investigation at a +10. That feels pretty nice. Animal handling is at a 1. We don't really need it because of speak with animals, which means that we can use all our charisma stuff for that instead, so that's fine. Useless stat, we don't need it. Insight is at +9. Great. Medicine is at 1, but again, we don't really need it. Perception is at +9, which feels great, and survival is also at +1. So our 3 wisdom skills that we honestly won't use very much are at +1. I would say pick up medicine proficiency if you want to make use of the alchemy system, maybe throw in a couple of levels of transmutation. That's up to you. Moving on to our charisma, obviously the big one. Intimidation is our weakness. We are only human after all, but we still have a +8 to it, which is pretty damn good. We're also going to be rocking a 12 in deception, performance, and persuasion, which just feels amazing. So yeah, that is the build. And overall, like I said, it's a very competent skill monkey. You've got the tools in your arsenal to basically guarantee success on any of, well, 99% of checks in this game, especially the relevant ones. You've got a wide array of battlefield control options to keep your enemies under thumb and let your allies do their work. You have support options to buff them up with things like haste. And again, you're very resource efficient. You've got a powerful Eldritch Blast and 3 short rests to fuel your spell slots for your Warlock shenanigans. But again, those skill checks, man, they're going to feel pretty damn amazing. So yeah, I'm really happy with this build overall. I think it's one of the better builds I've done for pure roleplay as well. I really like the idea of this, and the fact that it can synergize with the Illithid powers so well to give you even more to work with as you move into the late game. Like, that creates another side quest that I love to do with these types of builds, so feel free to run those as well. Just make sure you pick up the kind of missable things on the way, like Survival Instinct and the Awaken passives, and honestly, if you're going to lean into the psychic stuff, grab that Resonance Stone, because that could be a big boon to your playstyle. If you're willing to get in close range, which, maybe you don't actually want to. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave it here. I don't think there's much else for me to say. Sorry that this build was a bit samey compared to one of my old ones, but I really wanted to explore this concept. Like I said, I've been theorizing a similar build in D&D 2024, and I'm honestly really interested in potentially making a video on that concept. So if you liked this build and you like my content overall, let me know if you would like to see a video in my style of content, but for a D&D build. I've done it before, but I don't think I really executed it that well. So maybe with these D&D builds, it could be something that happens once every couple of weeks or so, maybe once a month, where it is like something that I put a bit more into and it's like a side project running in the background. If you would like to see D&D 2024 builds specifically from me, let me know, because I'm kind of interested in showing off some ideas that I have with the new system. My Great Old One Warlock build in particular being something that I'm kind of proud to show off, so let me know if that's something you'd want to see. Right, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.